We are, of course, in conversation with Iran, but at the moment it's very limited. Until last Thursday, it was very intense.
If there are no further questions, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you have been listening there to Rafael Grossi, the head of the nuclear watchdog agency, the IAEA, and he addressed two issues that have been in the news. First, the fact that his agency has lost contact with the Iranian nuclear authorities. He seemed to downplay that, saying, look, they're still in touch with the broader Iranian authorities, but suggested the lack of internet may be to blame. And then he also discussed the Iranian accusations that the U.S. has attacked nuclear facilities. In response to that, he said they haven't seen major military targeting of nuclear facilities, but they're looking at satellite images. There may be something, but not anything significant. Let's go to Mohammed Val, who's standing by for us in Tehran. Mo, you were also listening along there. What did you hear? What stood out to you?
Yeah, what stood out to me is that several questions were addressed regarding access, and basically the head of the IAEA made it clear that they haven't been given access by the Iranians, despite repeated demands or requests to this effect. And because of that, they can't have a first-hand assessment of the situation of the nuclear sites and the situation of the uranium and the location of that, whether it has been removed or not. And alongside this, he has been trying to take a middle of the road approach. He's not condemning the war, but he's not also supporting any side, and he's giving the hint that, you know, these people who have waged the war on Iran have their own story for the narrative and so on, and their justifications. But his agency is not concerned with that, and that's not its approach. Its approach is to look for rapprochement between the two sides for understanding. It has always been supporting any approach that would lead to a kind of deal between the two sides. They are still open for communication, but channels of communication with Iran have been closed for a while now, especially since the latest strikes in June on nuclear sites here in Iran. And he's critical of that. He thinks that it is going to be for the interest of everyone, for safety, for peace in the region, that Iranians open up and allow the agency to come back again here and inspect those sites.
All right, Mohammed Val there with the recap from Vienna, or from Tehran, excuse me, on the press conference that we heard just there from Rafael Grossi. Mohammed, keep us posted if we hear more. All right, well, we mentioned earlier a Saudi oil refinery has been targeted by an Iranian drone attack. The kingdom has shut its biggest domestic oil refinery as a precaution. Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said 2 drones tried to strike Aramco's Ras Tanura facility, but were intercepted. It added that falling debris caused a limited fire there. It's one of the biggest plants in the world, producing more than 500,000 barrels per day. All right, let's bring in economist and oil and gas specialist Cornelia Meyer. She's the CEO of Meyer Resources, joining us now from London. So look, we have been talking all morning about these strikes on these oil facilities in the Gulf, in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and now also some indication that there has also been potentially damage to facilities or to a facility here in Qatar. I just wonder, in terms of the global oil market, how big of a deal is this?
Well, it's a big deal because, you know, the GCC and the wider region is sort of one of the major hydrocarbon provinces. And when we look at Qatar LNG, and it's an LNG, it's an LNG facility, LNG export facility that is rumored to be targeted. Qatar is the 3rd largest exporter of LNG, so it really does matter. It especially matters to Europe, which wants to wean itself off the Russian LNG and wants Qatari LNG and US LNG. So it does matter. And obviously, if you strike the biggest refining complex in the world, that does matter, but that is more sort of for domestic purposes. But what's really the big thing here is, when can ships safely pass through the Straits of Hormuz again? Because if you look at oil, crude and products together, 20% have to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and if you look at LNG, 20% have to go to the Straits of Hormuz. Oil, it's Asia that's affected. LNG, it's Europe that's affected.
So Can you just touch on how this is going to impact the United States? Obviously, President Trump, has really talked a lot about gas prices for Americans. Oil prices are set on the international markets, even though the United States is energy independent. Surely this is going to have an impact on American markets as well.
It does have. Look, crude oil is the commodity that's the most globally priced and globally traded commodity. So if the global indices for WTI, Brent, and so go up, it obviously also goes up in the U.S. So Americans will feel it at the pump. It does really also impact. It does impact countries like China, because China is about 10% of China's crude imports come from Iran. 38% of all the oil going through the Straits of Hormuz go to China. So China and also other Asian countries are very much affected as well.
Do you have a sense of how resilient these oil facilities are in the Gulf? And what I mean by that is, how well protected are they? How spread out are they? And how easily the Iranians could cause huge amounts of damage?
I think they're quite well protected. If I look at KSA, they're quite well protected. They had oil facilities struck a few years back by the Houthis, which actually made them really beef up their defenses. They're quite well protected. Let's not forget, KSA has averted several attacks above Riyadh and also above the eastern province, which is the oil producing province of the kingdom. So they're quite well protected. But the thing with these things is, if there's 100 missiles or drones launched and you shoot down 99, you have a 99% protection. The one that gets through still gives damage.
All right, Cornelia Meyer, CEO of Meyer Resources, joining us from London. Thank you for your insight. We appreciate it. All right, Zeydoun El-Kanini is a Middle East politics lecturer at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Can I just ask you quickly about the press conference that we just heard from the IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, and he talked about the nuclear stockpile that Iran has, and he believes it's at the Isfahan facility, and he hopes that it hasn't been moved. I mean, from your vantage point, does Iran have an interest? Would they have any motivation to move it, or does it make more sense that the Americans and the Israelis know where it is?
Well, they definitely know where it is, according to previous talks and previous indications, where a lot of these negotiations, which eventually led to the Iran nuclear deal during the Obama's administration. But it doesn't seem like the nuclear stockpile as a conversation is being put at the forefront in the war. This would be a suicidal tactic by the Iranian regime. Particularly given that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been very evident and significantly trying to present itself as a regional player that is happy to accept the international conditions to avoid facilitating the uranium into a potential nuclear bomb.
I just want to ask you about the situation in the Gulf and these oil facilities that have been hit. And I wonder, look, how much leverage do these Gulf countries have to tell Iran enough is enough? I mean, obviously, this could have a big impact on global oil markets if there's more damage.
Well, the most important leverage that most of these GCC states can present before Iran and to ensure that it would limit some of the geopolitical consequences that it might face, including the ones that we're witnessing these days, is the diplomatic element and is the efforts these countries and the commitment they have presented towards becoming mediators that eventually led to the U.S. to postpone, but also to reconsider its strike, which unfortunately eventually took place and was conducted against Iran. Iran eventually, after this war, will have to go back to the very same neighborhood which does neighbor these GCC states, which means the future relationship might be very different, not just in terms of the GCC-Iran relations, but even the GCC-US relations, as one of the previous analysts who presented to us in the previous hour or two is that the entire rationale of having these U.S. bases was to avoid such regional challenges to be presented to these countries. It seems like it has been attracting these challenges now.
We're also, of course, following the situation closely in Iran right now. There have been strikes there on southern Lebanon in response to Hezbollah attacks on Israel that caused no damage, didn't kill or injure anybody. Israel is now talking about the real possibility of boots on the ground in southern Lebanon. Can this happen without the United States approval, or do you think that the United States kind of has already given Israel its tacit approval by allowing this to go ahead already?
Well, Israel has been attacking Lebanon and Palestine in the previous 2.5 years without any calculations and considerations whether it makes sense in the mindset of the U.S. administration or many other administrations within the Western alliances. The big question here is, will Hezbollah go all in this war? One has to consider that Iran isn't just a country that we're looking at that is attacking the U.S. bases here. It also represents a wide variety and array of proxy networks in the region, which includes Lebanon's Hezbollah, includes some of the militias in Iraq, includes the Houthi movement and many other armed groups in the region, which means that the war might be escalated and expanded if it were to be continued through some of these associates. Although the action or the reaction coming out of the armed wings affiliated with Iran within Iraq haven't indicated or reflected a strong response that usually is associated with Iran's previous acts in the region.
All right, Zeydoun El-Kenani, we appreciate your insight. Thank you. Well, the president of Cyprus has confirmed the UK's Royal Air Force Base on the island has sustained minor damage in a drone strike. Nikos Christopoulos says the attack struck the base in Akrotiri on Cyprus's southern coast overnight. Listen. The base is under British control and marks the first time UK or EU territory has been hit since the conflict began. He says authorities have been put on alert and confirmed the country has no intention of taking any military action. And from propping up Iran's last Shah to killing the supreme leader, the U.S. has a long history of interference with Tehran's affairs. Patty Cohane now takes a look at how the two nations have been grown from being allies to adversaries.
The Shah of Persia has been paying a state visit to President Truman.
For more than 80 years, U.S. presidents have put an unusual focus on Iran.
Iran.
Beginning in World War II, Britain and the United States used Iran to funnel weapons to help Russia fight Nazi Germany. Successive presidents hosting, supporting, and applauding the Shah, Mohammad Pahlavi. In 1952, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower authorized Operation Ajax, giving the CIA authority to launch a coup, along with the British, to restore the Shah to power, after the Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, sought to nationalize the country's oil industry. President Eisenhower then sought to bolster the Shah with the Atoms for Peace program in 1957, giving Iran highly enriched uranium and training its scientists in hopes that it would encourage civilian use and not lead to building a nuclear weapon.
Our defense, therefore, will be stronger if, under appropriate security safeguards, we share with our allies certain knowledge of the tactical use of our nuclear weapons.
President John F. Kennedy welcomed the Shah to Washington. President Richard Nixon and President Jimmy Carter even visited Tehran.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability.
A show of U.S. support for the increasingly authoritarian Shah, who in 1979 fled the country, and Ayatollah Khomeini took power of the newly named Islamic Republic of Iran. In November of 1979, when President Carter allowed the Shah to come to the U.S. for medical to cover the U.S. Embassy, taking 52 Americans hostage, that and a botched rescue all but assured Carter's defeat to Ronald Reagan. The hostages were released as soon as he took office.
Fellow Americans.
During President Reagan's time in office, the U.S. secretly supported Iraq in its war with Iran, providing intelligence and economic aid to the Iraqi military. In 1983, the U.S. blamed Hezbollah, backed by Iran, for bombing the Marine barracks in Beirut, killing 241 Marines. It was later uncovered that the Reagan administration was also secretly selling weapons to Iran in order to fund rebels in Nicaragua. And in 1988, tensions increased when the U.S. Navy accidentally shot down an Iranian passenger jet, killing the 290 people on board. Modern presidents continue to try to pressure Iran with increasing sanctions, but after the September 11th attacks, then President George W. Bush put Iran high on the nation's enemies list, including it along with North Korea and Iraq in the axis of evil.
Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom.
President Barack Obama took a different approach, making an agreement with Iran along with other world powers to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. A deal President Donald Trump ripped up in his first term, also launching a strike in Iraq to kill Qasem Soleimani, the leader of Iran's Quds Force. Now in his second term, launching military strikes for a second time, openly calling for regime change, a new and deadly chapter in a long history of U.S. involvement in Iran. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
It is 12 GMT, that's 2 p.m. in Tel Aviv and 3:30 in the afternoon in Tehran. I'm Cyril Vanier, and you're watching Al Jazeera's coverage of the conflict between Israel, the U.S., and Iran, which now threatens global energy supplies. For the first time, Iran is expanding its targets to include oil and gas facilities in the Gulf region. Iranian drones have been intercepted at a major Saudi oil refinery and a Qatari energy facility. There's also been an oil tanker hit in the Gulf of Oman, killing at least one person there. Kuwait, the UAE, and Bahrain are also reporting Iranian drone and missile attacks. And some breaking news from Qatar Energy, which is Qatar's state-owned petroleum company. It's saying that it has ceased all production of liquefied natural gas and associated products due to military attacks on Qatar Energy's operating facilities. Qatar's North Field is the largest natural gas field in the world, and it is shared with Iran. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has shut its biggest domestic oil refinery as a precaution. Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said 2 drones tried to strike Aramco's Ras Tanura facility but were intercepted. It is one of the biggest plants in the world, producing more than 500,000 barrels of oil a day. Iran has also targeted UK or European territory for the first time since the conflict began. Cyprus has confirmed the UK's Royal Air Force base on the island sustained minor damage in an Iranian drone strike overnight. Nikos Christodoulidis says that the attack struck the base in Akrotiri, that's on Cyprus's southern coast. And the conflict also spilling over into Lebanon. Israel has launched airstrikes on Beirut, drawing in Iran's ally Hezbollah. Attacks across Lebanon have killed at least 31 people, including a senior Hezbollah official. Hundreds of thousands of people are fleeing. Israel says the attacks are in response to Hezbollah firing rockets and drones at its territory. In Iran itself, the Red Crescent says at least 555 people have been killed in 3 days of joint U.S.-Israeli strikes. The Israeli military says it has begun a new wave of attacks in the heart of Tehran. More than 130 cities and towns across the country have come under fire. Well, Al Jazeera is live in Tehran, Beirut, Ramallah. We're also live at the White House in the U.S., Westminster in the U.K., and right here in Doha, the Qatari capital. Zain Basravi has the developments across the Gulf. Zain, this breaking news, we found out just minutes ago that not only has Iran targeted energy infrastructure really across the region, but Qatar is saying it is suspending production of LNG, liquefied natural gas, which is its major resource.
This is the very moment that we can say that this conflict now will almost certainly have global ramifications. The energy sector in this part of the world, Qatar with its liquid natural gas, Saudi with its massive oil exports, really every country in this region is in some way intrinsic to the global energy market. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, 20% of the world's energy goes through that strait. That is in peril now. This is the moment. 3 days into this conflict, it was already a certainty that this would have some kind of ramifications, but the global ramifications that will be felt by people all over the world when they're fueling their cars, when they're beginning to pay their bills, we can mark this as the moment where that begins.
Yeah, and this I think it's safe to say, is one of the worst case scenarios for Gulf countries, Qatar and Saudi Arabia included.
That is correct. Ras Laffan, which is here in the north of Qatar, just about 80 kilometers north of Doha, is the largest liquid natural gas processing facility in the world, one of the largest exporters of this very vital resource. And it is the lifeblood for Qatar. It is the reason that Qatar is able to have all of the projects that it funds. It is the primary source of income, of making this country able to operate in any sort of capacity. So this hits at the core of this country's ability to run its economy. And that's the case for Saudi Arabia with its Aramco facility. And it is the case with Oman for its ports. It is the case with every country where they are now attacking not only civilian airports, but energy infrastructure. They've been attacking civilian infrastructure as well. This is really a widespread retaliation. There is a method to this madness. There is a method to this chaos. If you look at it from the Iranian point of view, they said they would do something like this. What they're trying to illustrate is one clear point. They're trying to pressure their neighboring countries, close U.S. allies, who have been in this balancing act between the United States and Iran for some time. What they're trying to do is place pressure on these countries to try to put a clock on this conflict. The thinking being that if they're able to pressure these countries into pushing the U.S. and Israel to back off, that may mean less pressure on Iran. But it may also be simple retaliation. It may be what it is on the face of it. Iran said that if it is attacked, it will make sure that the entire region is drawn into the conflict. And it appears there are no more red lines when it comes to this war.
Mohammed Val is in Tehran. Mohammed, this situation is quite unique because this gas field that is the largest in the world is actually shared by Iran and Qatar. Is there any knock-on effect on Iran?
Cyril, the Iranian authorities have been making it clear that once this offensive on their territory starts, they will not pull any punches and they will not think of consequences. The primary goal, the primary priority for the Iranians is, as they say, is to defend themselves in the most strong, in the most ferocious way, in a manner that will make it clear to the enemy, as they describe it, that it will have a cost. It will have a cost to pay for this war, for what they describe as an aggression against their country. So, I mean, they have been following their words with action, and it's surprisingly very soon that they have started to change the nature of this war into a much bigger conflict that involves resources, because they know, the Iranians know that the resources are the weak spot, both for the Gulf neighboring countries, who in Iranian view are supporting this war against them, and also in the point of view of the Americans and the outside world. Once resources are touched, particularly energy, that's a very strong message to the international community that aggression against Iran, as they describe it, will have a cost that the world is going to pay.
Yeah, Mohammed, I think you're making a very important point here, which is that prior to all of this, Tehran had warned that they would retaliate against U.S. military bases in the region, and in less than 48 hours, that they have significantly broadened their list of targets. They're now going after energy facilities as well. Noor Odeh is in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So, Noor, Israel is, of course, at the heart of it, with missiles going both ways. They continue to launch attacks at Iran, and all the while they are defending against Iranian missiles. What's the latest?
Well, Cyril, 6 different waves of Iranian missiles in the past hour. 6 times that the sirens went off in a very large area, spanning from Netanya in the northern coastal area all the way down to Asqalan or Ashkelon, just above the Gaza Strip. That entire area and everything to the east of it, all the way to the border with Jordan, so including much of the occupied West Bank, were under warnings of incoming Iranian missiles. We saw several incidents where large shrapnel or missiles actually struck targets. At least 17 people people were injured in Ashkelon. Now, the only way we can ascertain where some of those missiles are creating damage is if we see visuals. And the only time we're seeing video, Cyril, is if they're cleared by the Israeli military sensor. But what we can see, what we can ascertain, is that there's a pattern where the area covered by the sirens includes areas where there are military bases, where the military industrial complex has factories, for example, whether it's in northern Israel, in the area close to Tiberias Lake, or in the Negev in the south, where there are large military bases that are used at the moment by Israel and the U.S. Air Force. So we don't know the targets, we don't know the impact, only what we're allowed to see. And what we've seen, at least in Ashkelon, is significant damage to several buildings.
Noor, last time Israel came under attack from Iran's missiles, they claimed that their interception rate was in the high 90%. Are we still looking at something like that?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's one that a lot of people have been wondering about, Cyril, because Israel has been very tight-lipped about how many missiles have actually been fired at it and how many have been down. But what we can say is that at least the narrative from the Israeli army is that the number of missiles Iran is firing in each volley is less than what they saw in the June confrontation, also initiated by Israel. That doesn't mean that the air defense systems in Israel are less busy, because for every Iranian missile, according to what we've been hearing from military experts, at least 3 missiles have to be fired from the ground by the Israelis. So this is an expensive effort, and it requires a lot of attention. The concern now is if, in fact, there will be engagement with Hezbollah and from Hezbollah in the north, that those capacities will be stretched thin. And that's really what lies ahead if, in fact, Israel expands its operations, its attacks to Lebanon, especially through a ground invasion.
Noor, we'll speak to you again in a minute. Let me bring in Zaina Khodr, Al Jazeera's Zaina Khodr, who's in Lebanon. Zaina, Israel has targeted Lebanon again today after Hezbollah launched missiles and essentially joined the war on the side of Iran, launching rockets at northern Israel. What is the position of the Lebanese government here?
Well, the Lebanese government had a lengthy emergency meeting and came up with really unprecedented decisions. And that is, first, they are banning Hezbollah's military and intelligence activities, basically saying that the military wing of Hezbollah is now illegal. The government saying that the group can still operate politically in the country, but it must hand over its weapons to the state. For decades, following the end of the civil war in 1990, all of the different Lebanese parties, militias, they disbanded and handed their weapons over to the state, except Hezbollah. They retained their weapons on the pretext that they were a resistance force fighting Israel. So now there's a new political leadership in the country. They took power last year after Hezbollah was severely weakened, and now they are declaring all of Hezbollah's military and intelligence activities illegal. A short while ago, the Israeli army posted on social media that it intends to target all of the Qard al-Hassan branches. These are financial institutions run by Hezbollah across the country, and they're also threatening to target a building in one of the neighborhoods in Beirut's southern suburbs. We're wearing the helmet because if you can hear the gunfire. What happens is that this is gunfire. What happens is that when the Israeli army posts these warnings on social media, Hezbollah fires these warning shots in the neighborhoods to tell residents to leave that area. So we're expecting an airstrike any time now in the Burj al-Barajni neighborhood, and we're also expecting airstrikes across the country where Qard al-Hassan, these financial institutions. We're in a very, very similar situation like back in late 2024 when Israel really piled a lot of pressure on Hezbollah. And this pressure appears to be continuing, with the Israeli army even telling people, residents of people who left their homes overnight from areas where Hezbollah has influence, telling them they are not going home anytime soon. So really, when you punish a community, you are putting more pressure on Hezbollah. So we're expecting strikes at any time now following those warnings issued by the Israeli army.
Zaina, I want to make sure our viewers understand how significant this development is that you informed us of. The Lebanese government has now banned Hezbollah's military activity. I mean, the militia group Hezbollah, which has since evolved into a political party, of course, was at one point the most dominant military force, until quite recently, most dominant military force in Lebanon. And for the government, whether it's the president or the prime minister, to simply ban their military and their intelligence would have been unthinkable 1 or 2 years ago.
Well, no doubt, Hezbollah was not just the most powerful military force in the country, stronger than the Lebanese army. It was also the most powerful political force, along with its allies controlling political power in Lebanon. That changed post-October 2024, when Israel began to target the group, launching a wide-scale aerial bombardment through September, October, November in 2024. Then you had a ceasefire, but despite that ceasefire, the Israeli army continued to target Hezbollah's members and what they call Hezbollah's assets, underground facilities. So this group really has been weakened. It's not just because of the Israeli strikes. We also have to remember neighboring Syria, Hezbollah used this really as a logistical base. But with the fall of the Assad regime and the new authorities in Damascus, Hezbollah lost that as well. And Hezbollah has been coming under a lot of financial pressure with new restrictions in place. So there is a new political leadership in Lebanon, and we're seeing these bold decisions, if you like, but it's still a weak state. And the question is, will they be able to implement this, force Hezbollah to hand over their weapons? Hezbollah has been refusing to hand over its weapons north of the Litani River, saying that they will not submit to Israeli and American demands. The Lebanese state argues that this is not a foreign demand, but a national demand, a demand so that the country can reclaim sovereignty and for the state to be able to extend its authority and ensure that weapons are solely in the hands of the state. So bold decisions, now the implementation, and that really is key.
Zaina, we were just seeing the traffic jam, people leaving southern Beirut, which is the target, has been the target of multiple military strikes. Noor, back to you on this. What is Israel saying about what it intends to do with Hezbollah right now? It has targeted the southern suburbs of Beirut, as we said, a stronghold of Hezbollah. And as I understand it, they have now put Hezbollah's new leader on their official list of targets.
That's right, Cyril. I mean, for weeks now, if not more, there have been a lot of discussions in Israel about carrying out a large-scale operation against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And there was a flurry of diplomatic activities to try and prevent that, to give the Lebanese state a chance to fulfill the agreement that ended the confrontation between Hezbollah and Israel. And for a while, it seemed that those efforts were working. But all the time, Israel understood that if it were to launch strikes to start a war with Iran, engagement with Hezbollah was really a very real and credible possibility. And when the cabinet started its meeting overnight, there were talks in right-wing media circles, in people from reporters close to Benjamin Netanyahu, that the cabinet was already considering expanding the war to another front. Everybody understood that to be possibly Lebanon. With Hezbollah launching those drones and the missiles, basically Israel got what it wanted, and it immediately announced that it was going to teach Hezbollah a lesson. We heard from the Israeli Minister of Defense saying that Israel is going to launch a wide-scale offensive, that nobody was immune, not even the group's Secretary General. Avigdor Lieberman, who was a defense minister at some point, also a right-wing figure, but from the opposition, said that Israel must seize this opportunity and Hezbollah once and for all. There was a meeting between the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, and the Israeli Prime Minister earlier in the day. That man, Yair Lapid, expressed absolute support to the Prime Minister in the war with Iran, but also with Hezbollah.
And Noor O'Day, thank you very much. This conflict was initiated 2.5 days ago by two countries, Israel and the United States. We just got the latest from Israel and the region here across the Middle East and the Gulf. Let's go to the White House. Kimberly Halkett is here. Kimberly, outside of two recorded video messages by Donald Trump, there's been very little public communication, and yet he has thrown the U.S. into what appears, and what he even says, is another major war in the Middle East. What's going on?
Well, the U.S. president was, as he arrived back in the United States, as he arrived back in Washington from Florida, had little to say to reporters, which is notable. This is recognition by the U.S. president that this is quickly escalating, and that he is trying to control the narrative around the fact that we have seen oil and gas prices spiking, that the flow of energy in the Strait of Hormuz has been disrupted, and his European allies and Asian allies are reacting. And this is the concern for the U.S. president, that there is now going to be a long-term oil crisis that could potentially see the price of oil spiking above $100 a barrel. So this is a big problem for the U.S. president. Not only is there a concern of a global economic crisis, but he was a president that not only was elected to end foreign entanglements for the United States, but which obviously isn't happening, but also to get control of the economy, to bring prices down. This is going to do just the opposite of that. This could see inflation spike. It could spike the transportation costs in the United States and really affect economic output around the world. Now, already we know from polling data, Cyril, that only 27% of Americans support Donald Trump's decision to take military action against Iran. The fact that this could now affect not only the U.S. economy, but the global economy could drive public support and allied support down even further.
Kimberly Halkett reporting from the White House. Thank you, Kimberly. Now, we told you at the top of the show that Qatar, which sits on the world's largest reserve of natural gas, is suspending its liquefied natural gas production. This is major. We also told you at the top of the show that Iran was now targeting energy infrastructure really across the region. It's not just Qatar, it's also Saudi Arabia. A tanker was hit in Oman. Osama bin Javed is looking at the global impact of this potential energy disruption from Brussels. Brief us on what we can expect at this very early stage, now that we know, Osama, that Iran has expanded its list of targets and it is now going after energy.
Well, this is the most significant impact that you will feel on the global stage, because Qatar Energy supplies about 20 to 25% of the globe's energy. This attack on the Ras Laffan facility, this is the world's largest LNG terminal. Qatar Energy not just provides the LNG, but it also operates a fleet of roughly about 170 ships and container ships, which are going to be expanded to 200 by 2030. By expansion plans that Qatar Energy has in the North Fields would make it one of the biggest players. It's one of the top 3 players anyway. So this is going to have a knock-on impact on everything energy related. And liquefied natural gas, you have to understand, is not the natural gas that you use, but it is essentially a very important component of the global gas supply. It provides electricity. It is used in production. It runs power plants. And a lot of it is exported to all over the world, including Europe, here where I am. So it is a significant blow to the global energy supplies. It is not just Qatar Gas, though. The largest oil refinery in Saudi Arabia has also stopped as of this morning. It is no longer refining oil. So this is certainly getting a lot bigger than people anticipated or expected. The chokeholds that Iran and the Yemenis have on the two major Bab el-Mandeb and Strait of Hormuz
Osama, can I jump in
to
here?
essentially
I want to
impact
just inform you,
70%
Osama,
of the global
that
supplies.
you said chokeholds. We're showing the map right now because viewers need to understand the geography of this, right? 20% of the world's energy goes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is the tiniest waterway that you see there in the center of your map, and it's in between Oman and Iran. And Osama, please, that is great. Keep walking us through this, but I wanted to show the map because we can see on screen left for our viewers, you see Qatar, there's Bahrain, there's Saudi Arabia, there's the UAE, there's Iran itself, by the way. All of these major oil suppliers, and all of that, or most of that energy to get to the rest of the world needs to go through that tiny little choke point, which is about 30 to 40 kilometers wide, which appears to be closed. And Osama, hence your point about the rest of the world will feel this.
Well, 30 kilometers is the width of that channel that you see, that tiny little channel. It becomes, for shipping lanes, even tighter. And Iran controls the north and Omanis control the south, where tankers have come under attack. The tankers have come attack in the port of Jabal Ali. There's been tankers who've come under attack in the waters of Bahrain. And now this. So essentially, what you're seeing is a major disruption. So far, this is the first working day of the week after the markets opened. The global oil markets are hovering just around $80 a barrel, which is lower than expected. But again, if shock waves like this are going to be inserted into the system, this is going to have a knock-on effect on everything from production, from electricity, from the cost of various goods supplies, even marine traffic. So everything on a global scale is now going to feel an impact. And this is something that the Iranians had been warning all along. Iran itself is the third largest producer in the OPEC countries. It produces about 4% of the global oil supplies, and even on its offshore oil production plants and facilities, there have been a number of explosions that have been reported this morning as well. So this is going to have wider ramifications for global energy markets. And there's going to be a serious rethink about where the world stands. There's already a call for the Europeans to do an assessment of where their oil reserves are. The Chinese obviously are going to be the first ones affected by this, but this is not just going to be limited to these countries. Even in the United States, you're going to have an impact on energy prices.
Osama, thank you very much. Let's go back to Zain Basravi, who is in the Qatari capital. Zain, I think after territorial integrity and the safety of their populations, for Gulf countries, their energy, their source of energy and ability to export it out to the rest of the world is really the most precious thing that they have. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. It's been the case for over a century, if not longer. And their entire identity, their economy, every bit of development that's happened is tied to their ability to export their energy. Even these modern cities that have become safe havens from regional conflicts, whether there was war in India and Pakistan, or in Lebanon, in Iran, in Iraq, anywhere in the region, even in Somalia or on the African continent, wherever there was instability, the Gulf countries, whether it's the capitals of Saudi or Qatar, whether it's Dubai or the other crucial states in the UAE, whether it's Oman, all of them represented a kind of silo. They were oases of calm and commerce and productivity and progress, and a safe haven for people to come to make business. And so all of that is now under attack. And what we've seen is these countries, along with the United States, though their participation in a joint statement is kind of dubious, considering it is the U.S. and Israel that began this conflict. It does matter who started it. They did attack Iran first. They've issued a joint statement in which they have said that the actions that Iran is taking, albeit in retaliation, is a dangerous escalation that violates the sovereignty of multiple states and threatens that regional stability that the region has come to rely on, but that the global economy has come to rely on for so long. They go on to say that targeting civilians and non-belligerent states is reckless behavior that undermines stability, and that we stand united in defense of our citizens, our sovereignty, and our territories. The statement of the Gulf countries and the U.S. go on to say, we reaffirm our right to self-defense in the face of these attacks, and we underscore our commitment to regional security, and we commend the effective cooperation in the field of air and missile defense that prevent greater loss of life and destruction. So they're striking a tone of unity, but they are also talking in a capacity that seems to illustrate they are willing to take more defensive action going forward.
Zain, thank you very much. We're joined now by Badr Al-Saif, assistant professor at Kuwait University. And sir, you're joining us from Kuwait City. It's great to have you on the program. So Iran had said that if a war began, they would consider all U.S. bases across the region legitimate targets. Within 48 hours of this conflict beginning, they changed the rules of engagement, and they are going after civilian targets across, really, the board in all of their neighbors, whether it's the UAE, whether it's Qatar, whether it's Saudi Arabia, and they are going after energy. Your analysis?
Iran is fighting a war of existence. It's an existential war for them. And I think that's why you see them going after different targets around them. This is a long-term issue that we've been having with our neighbors in Iran. We've been trying to find a way to coexist peacefully. This has been an issue since the beginnings of the Islamic Republic. And we've managed, sometimes with difficult responses and answers from their end, but we managed with all the meddling in the internal affairs of Gulf states, with the proxy activities, with some of the wars that happened at the time. But this cannot continue forever. And I think we've reached a point in which they're raising the ante to unprecedented levels. This brings the question of what next? And I think the Gulf states need to be clear-eyed on their defenses, and they need to be very clear on this being a broaching of sovereignty. This is no longer, as you said, about U.S. bases. And even the argument about U.S. bases is flawed. These are bases that are in, sovereign countries across the Gulf. So the question here is, how can we develop a strategy that does not put us into the same position as Iran and Israel and the U.S.? Because that's
Badr, this is so interesting.
Trying to do.
This is so interesting. What do you mean by that? You've said two things. You've said that the Gulf states need to be clear-eyed about their defenses. First of all, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that they need to adopt a more offensive posture in what is now a regional war? That's number one. And then what do you mean by Gulf states need to figure out a strategy that doesn't lump them with Israel?
Because they are separate from Israel and the U.S. This is not their war. And I think what the effort has been, and Iran and Israel here are both joining, unfortunately, in the same goal of trying to push the Gulf states away from Iran into the hands of Israel and the U.S. and fighting their war. We are trying to mediate in our best, and I think we need to develop a thin line or a distinctive line in which we're going after, as I said, our own defense mechanisms. Does that mean going on the offensive? I think all options should be on the table, because we cannot sustain this whole interception for a while. This is going to be unprecedented and dangerous for our economies, for our maritime security, for our sovereignty in general. So there needs to be clear solutions out of this. Now, mind you, diplomacy...
Would you allow me to jump in? Because I do think this is such a key point. You appear to be advocating for Gulf states to mark out their own position in this, which is, with their own political identity. And yet both Iran and, I think you could argue, the U.S. and Israel have actually set circumstances that create a binary choice for Gulf states, where if you're not with one side, you're with the other. Is that fair?
That has been on display not only during the past few days in the war, Cyril, but across the past few months and years. And we've been successful in trying to manage ourselves with both Iran on the one hand and the U.S. and Israel on the other. And I think that needs to continue. But that should not continue without us marking our own independent route And this is a long-term security issue, right? It's not a day or two. And it will take very difficult decisions on how do we deal with our partnerships, security partnerships with the US, be it, or with other partners. How do we develop our own independence in pushing things through? I think these are very important questions that need to be handled accordingly.
Yeah, Badr, I have one more question for you, but I want to explain to our viewers what they're seeing on their screen, which is that earlier today we saw several U.S. Air Force jets be downed, and it wasn't clear there for a while what had happened. Iran claims that they downed at least one jet with their missiles, so they essentially claimed a tactical military success against at least one plane. And then CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, said that actually there was friendly fire whereby Kuwait's air defenses had mistakenly shot down the U.S. jet, and the pilots, the crew, were all able to self-eject, and they're now in hospital, and they're said to be okay. So that's what we're seeing on our screens. One more for you that is very tailored to where you are. What happened at the U.S. Embassy? Do you know? Because there was smoke seen rising from the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, and they said the message from the embassy was don't approach the building.
I mean, look, we've been, like the other Gulf states and Jordan, we've been under attack from Iran for some time now. And they've been going at different facilities, and the reports that we've heard, and I'm not privy to which version of this narrative is the more accurate one, because, you know, things are very fluid as we speak, but that they are attempting attacks and there has been interceptions. And hence you hear all the sirens off and the, you know, the bombings and the interceptions and so on.
What do you think needs to happen now?
Diplomacy. I never give up on diplomacy. I think, and you know, for those that were betting on a long-term war, which has been one of the options, I invite them to go back and check the conflicting U.S. statements. President Trump is open to everything at this stage. I mean,
the Iranians have said that they're not going to engage while they're being hit by the U.S. and even Qatar, which has, you know, carved out a role for itself as one of several key regional mediators, has said currently we're being targeted by Iran. We're not engaging with them right now. So diplomacy seems to have ground to a total halt.
We've been through this last June. This is more grave, no doubt, but I think there will be, you know, turnarounds into finding a solution to this. And it's not going to be an easy solution. That's why diplomacy has failed us twice before, because all the parties to the negotiation were not fully committed. And here I'm signaling the U.S., probably with some pressure from Israel. But I think we all need to have our heads back onto the table, and we need to produce something that is more lasting and that is clear for everyone involved in the region and beyond.
Okay, so I asked you what you think needs to happen now. That's an expression of intent. But what do you think is a plausible scenario? What do you think will happen now?
Look, I mean, as I said, all options are on the table. Are we going to see some more escalation before some calm? Possible.